Mike, welcome to the video podcast of Product Manager Thought Collectives. Thank you
Yeah,
for
thanks
being
for having me.
here. Usually, I start with our signature question: is how would you introduce yourself as if you were talking to an old friend you have not seen for 20 years? What are some updates you have in recent years? What are you up to? What is your origin story?
Love that. So an old friend I haven't seen in 20 years. So, I'm a father. That's where I'd start. I have two amazing kids, aged 10 and 12. I live in California. I love it out here. I'm originally from Chicago, but love California. And I'm very much in kind of the world of technology and things like that. So I had spent many years at PayPal, most recently running the innovation group there. I left there a few years ago to focus like solely on AI. So I write about AI. I advise companies in the space, and I'm a visiting fellow at the AI Center at San Diego State.
Yeah. So I first got to know about you because you gave an amazing orientation talk when I joined PayPal back in 2019. And then kind of we were just like brainstorming ideas. How do you get users if you were Venmo product manager, right? So there are all different ways. Maybe you give user money and stuff. So that was like pretty fun. So I would love to hear more about how you got into PayPal and how you became a senior director of the innovation labs, which is like an amazing kind of R&D center. And all the projects you got involved in was just like really fun. So love to hear more about that journey.
Yeah, I will say, I don't want to say it was a fluke, but it kind of was a fluke joining PayPal, to be completely honest. Look, I joined PayPal in 2011. I was at a startup and things were not going how I was hoping they'd be going, let's just say. I had my firstborn. I'm like, I need a bit of a steady paycheck. I felt at that time I need to travel less and all that. 2099, I'm that old, where they were actually bribing people with like $10 bills to join PayPal at that time. So I'd been a long time PayPal customer. A lot of classmates that I went to school with worked at PayPal, and it was right down the street, and it seemed like a cool opportunity. So I applied for a job in the mobile group, which was very exciting to join in 2011. Like mobile was like an emerging kind of weird technology.
Yeah,
They had just
definitely.
acquired this company called Zong that like kind of took over the mobile unit there. So it was an exciting time. I was dangerously unqualified. It was a product analytics job. And for anybody who's ever done like product analytics and things like that, like it's a lot of like SQL queries and all that. I didn't even know what SQL was. Like I had
How did you get the
no
job?
idea.
That's amazing. They took the chance on you.
So they absolutely did. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Patricia, who was my bank manager, and I told her this just recently, even I'm like, my gosh, I don't know why you hired me. You totally took a chance. The one thing I could say, and this is a pro tip for anybody out there who is ever going to interview at a public company, listen to the last few. Look, it doesn't matter what type of job it is. Listen to the last few earnings report, like calls. Actually read one of the 10 Qs, God forbid, or 10K, a financial documents. Like every public company has this. And you will get insights into like the bigger picture company strategy. So I do remember being in there and being able to like quote some numbers, like what PayPal's loss ratio was and things like this, that candidly, I think a lot of people interviewing me didn't know themselves. Because like when you're in a big company like that, you might not know that stuff because you're so worried about your one project that you're
domain.
working on.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but that's a way to kind of get big picture and to say, well, CEO is saying this. How is it that your project fits into that? And so I think I just asked a lot of good questions and happened to know a few good numbers, and I fooled them into hiring me. And PayPal was going to be a rebound job that I was going to stay at for a year as I figured out my life. And it was an amazing experience. Stayed there 11 years. Got to work on some really cool projects and eventually got to, run the innovation lab.
Yeah, so you started on the product analytics and then you moved to product marketing. And also, I think I'm looking at your LinkedIn and you were also a PM for a little bit. Yeah. But then eventually you moved on to the innovation labs. So how was that journey? How did you transition with so many different functions?
One of the great things about PayPal, there was always reorgs happening. So things were constantly changing, constantly shifting. And I just wanted to work for cool people. Like that was like my honest answer. So I remember I did product marketing because I like, well, I really like these people who are doing product marketing. And I'm like, well, let me go over there. And I was always open to new things. And I never really did what was traditionally defined in the job. Like my first analytics job, again, being the guy who doesn't know SQL, I think I was so focused on making the product better that a lot of people on the team, it was a very tight product team that we had. I think a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
didn't know I was the analytics person. They were like, well, yeah, he just does a bunch of stuff, like whatever, and like that. So I never like took on of just like, well, analytics, you should only do this. I didn't. I basically was in service of making a better product to better serve our customer.
Mm.
Um, and then specifically with the innovation lab opportunity, that really came from I was on a project called PayPal Beacon, which was
Yeah.
very, very cool, very ahead of its time technology. I kind of got to be known as the Beacon guy in some circles within the company.
Okay.
And part of it, though, like I had to take meetings with, like I had to take a lot of weird meetings. I remember one
Mm.
time I had to take a meeting with a bunch of lawyers. Like they were always throwing me on that, like, okay, Beacon guy, go talk to a bunch of lawyers. And I just remember the person I was meeting with was like, well, what can you do with this thing? Well, what else can
Mm.
you do? What else can you do? And I didn't realize this was a patent attorney. And what they
Mm.
were doing was
Oh.
like basically trying to see what you could do with this because they wanted to file patents on PayPal Beacon and the technology we're developing at the time. And for folks
Yeah.
who don't know, PayPal Beacon was basically a way to have a some kind of device like
Mm.
this talk to your phone.
Okay.
And then it will allow you to do things like hands-free payments and all that. And back in 2012, 2013, that was really novel, very
Yeah,
unique.
yeah. Well, that's like 2012. Okay, yeah, it's 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very cool tech. So we filed a whole bunch of patents, but I loved it. I'm like, oh my God, I could just think of ideas. I don't actually even need to build it. I could think of ideas and all that.
Yeah.
So I became a favorite of the patent team because I would hold these brainstorming sessions and things like that all the time. Just with
Mm-hmm.
my team, with other teams. It wasn't even, eventually, it wasn't even about my own product.
Yeah.
I just liked filing patent ideas and stuff like that. I filed hundreds, if not thousands of them in my time at PayPal. So, long story longer, when PayPal was splitting from eBay,
Yeah.
there was an opportunity to kind of form like an innovation function, and legal wanted to actually form that function because they wanted to rebuild our patent portfolio because half of it went to eBay, half of it was with PayPal.
PayPal. Okay.
And thus, since they wanted to rebuild, they wanted like, well, where can we get a bunch of patent ideas from? And they're like, well, Mike seems like a logical guy. And so that's when I moved from being a PM to kind of defining what innovation was going to be for the new company. Eventually moved out of legal into technology.
Mm.
But I did that for, 6+ years at the company and many different iterations. And honestly, it was the best possible job I could have. It was so much fun.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of patents and innovation labs time, what is your most memorable moment or most memorable patent among all like the hundreds of ones you filed? Do you have one or two of your favorite were just like
Yeah.
unforgettable? Maybe it's failure, maybe it's success.
I got a whole bunch of it. Oh, I could tell you how many failures there are, but let me tell you my favorite. Like, and this,
Yes.
it's because it's the one patent that both me and my wife are in fact. So, I was working at PayPal. This was when we were part of eBay. My wife got a job at eBay. She moved from
Mm.
Johnson and Johnson to eBay, and we were just
Hmm.
having dinner with the kids one night.
Yeah.
And she was just saying, like, oh, it's annoying on my LinkedIn. They're still showing me all these, you should know this person recommendations, but like I'm
Yeah.
surrounded by all these eBay people and it doesn't actually, it's not suggesting that.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
and then we just like start talking over dinner, and it became this thing about like location based um, recommendation engine, blah blah blah. I can't remember what it's called exactly, but it is the one patent that both my wife and myself are the inventors on. And it literally came over a dinner conversation over an idea she just happened to have, and she's a finance person. Like this is her only patents. In fact, she that's not her world in so many ways, but she had a great idea, and I'm like, this is cool. Let's take it somewhere. So yeah, so that is a issued patent, and definitely the one I'm most proud of.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I know you were leading a few key projects related to blockchain, related to Bitcoin at PayPal time, and then you were also having a lot of different kind of marketing ideas. What was the most challenging project you have ever led?
Oh gosh, the most challenging at PayPal or just in my career? PayPal specifically?
Up to you. Yeah, could be PayPal or could be your
Well, let
career.
me go pre-PayPal. I'm talking too much pay. I love PayPal, but I'm talking too much PayPal stuff. So, before PayPal, when I was in the world of private equity, this was I was doing environmental strategy for a paper company. So this was a time of like Inconvenient Truth. The Al Gore
Mm-hmm.
movie had come out, so like
Yep, I've seen
there's
that. Yeah.
definitely a move towards like being carbon neutral and so forth, and all that. And um, paper companies produce humongous amounts of CO2.
Yeah.
And like, so a lot of what I was looking at was like, how do you be more sustainable? And it was tough because it was an audience at the company that wasn't very, let's just say, believing of
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
some of the science behind that, or wanting to believe of the science behind that, or, for various political reasons in the US, I think, it was a very difficult time where like, you know, the left believed everything climate change, the right believed nothing climate change. And it was, not that different now, but in 2006, I'd say it was even like a greater divide.
Yeah.
Um, and so with that, it was a big challenge of like, how do I get the team to kind of buy into this vision? So one of the things I did was and this is something I recommend for anybody. I use this tool so many times. I just created a newsletter, and I would
Mm.
just send it out to people in the company.
Okay.
And it was nothing fancy. It was just like email. But what I would do was I would find anything about climate change or anything in there, and I would just kind of put like a nice executive summary, and I just start sending that out to people in the company,
Mm.
CEO on down and so forth. But like I was also being fairly strategic in what kind of things I would send. So,
Yeah.
if I knew that there was more resistance from a more right-leaning part of the organization politically, if Newt Gingrich, who was a very popular conservative politician at that time, was saying
Yeah.
something supporting climate change, which he did, and supporting the belief and we should do things, I would be
Mm.
sure to highlight that. Or Bill
Okay.
O'Reilly, who was a
Yeah.
pundit at the time.
Yeah.
I would put those things in there because I was trying to influence my audience and trying to get credibility. And I would just do this week after week after week. And again, it was never about being propaganda. Subtly was propaganda, but it was also just a way to I knew that leadership had to have a little bit of a different view. And ultimately, what mattered most to them was the economics of it. And so one of the projects I was most passionate about was, could we be a company that instead of turning trees into paper, we turn trees into fuel? Could we do that? So we started on a syngas project, and we were working on a small pilot. And oil prices were like $150 a barrel.
Mm-hmm.
And so the economics of this became really interesting. So I started to get a lot of interest within the company and so forth. The thing that happened that went against me was the financial crisis happened. And when the financial crisis happened, oil went from $150 a barrel down to like
Yeah.
$30 a barrel in a very short amount of time. And
Yeah.
when that happened, the economics just blew up.
Yeah.
So it never took off. I think the company eventually filed for bankruptcy and all that. I had left there, needless to say, and it never worked out. But like that was something that was challenging, where there was going to be this skepticism for leadership, but like how do you kind of get them to come around it? And I think I did see it, but
Yeah.
the economics then at just some point fell apart.
Right. Right. I see. Yeah. I think the challenging part is like changing people's mind when people already have a certain vision that they're used to, the belief they're holding dearly to. Right. You are trying
Yeah.
to challenge them. I think that can definitely be a very difficult process.
Young, I think one of the best, David McRaney, who is amazing. I hosted him at PayPal for another book he did before. A great podcaster does a podcast called You Are Not So Smart. He wrote a book called How Minds Change. And it is probably one of the best writings that I've ever read. I'm just like, how do minds change? Like, what is the process? Like, arguing with people does not change minds. Well, what it actually does, and how does this work, and so forth. So, yeah, for anybody interested in really getting into the psychology of that, it's a really beautifully written book.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I'll make sure I link that when we publish the newsletter as well.
David's a great guy. Yeah.
Definitely. Kind of switching the gear a little bit from career to your current state, right? How and why did you decide to pursue a Master of Fine Arts in writing? What was the moment that led to this decision? Or is something you always want to pursue?
No, it's definitely not something I always wanted to pursue. One of the great things I had when I was doing innovation at PayPal is I was basically, part of my job was just to inspire innovation throughout the company. One of the ways to do that was to bring in a bunch of authors. David McCraney was one, and like literally hundreds of other authors. So I talked to all these people. To be very candid, it was a little bit of an excuse for me to get to just talk to people I really admired, do that on stage and all that. But like, it was the greatest hack. So anybody at any company wants to do something like this, generally speaking, you can get, if you say to an author, hey, I'll pre-order 100 copies of your book, can you come to our office and do a talk? They will almost always do that, or at least do something with you on Zoom.
That's a great tip. Yeah,
it's a total hack because they need to get in pre-orders. So you can get people who charge like $25,000 an hour for speaking gigs normally to actually just do it for like 100 books that you buy. So it's a crazy
I remember Sarah Cooper was at PayPal. I was very excited. Yeah, definitely.
Sarah was amazing. Yes, this is Sarah Cooper before she really went viral during COVID. But Sarah was amazing. Actually, we hosted her twice. She's an incredible talent.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, sorry, what was the question? I totally got sidetracked.
So the question is like, what led to the decision of pursuing a Master of Fine Arts? So you said you admire these people, so you invite them over.
Authors, I'm like, and look, I was never good at English. I was more of a math and science kind of guy. And I'm like, I don't know, I read a lot. I enjoy this. Maybe I can do this. It's difficult, but it's something I want to do. I was also becoming obsessed with GPT-2 and GPT-3. And like what they could create and what they could do. So that was my proposal. So I kind of like, and this was in 2021, I started, I actually put forth a proposal of like, hey, like it's a part-time online program. And I was like, well, AI might have an impact someday on writing and all this. Like, how about like I join this program to kind of focus on the intersection of those two things? That's not, most people are writing a memoir or whatever when they join an MFA program. I was a little bit of a weird case in that, but you know, the program, like they accepted me. And it's been amazing. So I've taken these classes on screenwriting and all that, but there's always the AI angle, and it's made me a better writer throughout it as well, of course.
Yeah. What was your best takeaway so far in this master's journey? What is your favorite class? Or like favorite professor? What's your best takeaway?
Favorite class is screenwriting. And one of the things, and this is harped on in every class. So for anybody who's trying to write anything, fiction, nonfiction, doesn't matter. Your first draft is going to suck. It's going to be bad. It always is. It doesn't matter. I think Hemingway actually has a quote about this. It doesn't matter if you're Ernest Hemingway, or Jane Austen, or Mike Todasco. Like from the greatest of the greats to me, like it doesn't matter. It always sucks in your first draft. Mm-hmm. But that's okay. That's the part of the writing process, and that's the part that's great, and that's a part of that's exciting. And for me, being kind of like an ideas guy, it was really cool to kind of learn that iterative process. So especially for the screenwriting class I took, I mean, it was a full semester where we only finished the first. So most movies are done in 3 acts. Like we only wrote the first act, like in over 16 weeks. We wrote one act of a 3-act movie, but we just did it again and again and again and again. And then we gave each other feedback and all that.
Refine it.
Like, That's the most impressive thing. And this is, again, true even if you're dealing with like a large language model. Like if you're dealing with Claude or ChatGPT, like what it spits out the first time versus if you kind of feed it back into the model and say improve on this, and you say it again and again and again and it improves, like the fourth or fifth time, it's going to be much better than the first time it spits out. So this is true for machines and humans. You have to iterate to get a product that you're proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. Since last time we talked, I realized, I actually subscribed to Masterclass, and they have a lot of screenwriting class. So I think that's like a good start for me as a hobby. I took Malcolm Gladwell's Masterclass a few years ago, and I really liked it. So I resubscribed it this year. But yeah, definitely there's a lot of recommendations. If there's any books you recommend, let us know, and I'll also put that in the newsletter.
Well, for anybody, you just mentioned Malcolm Gladwell. He currently has a new, so his Revisionist History podcast has a short series right now about failed screenplays. And so it's super interesting. He just talked to Patty Jenkins, who did like Arrested Development and Wonder Woman and a whole bunch of stuff, about one of her failed screenplays. And it's really cool because you get to see the whole process. So these movies were never made. You kind of talk about why it wasn't made, but you also see the evolution of the screenwriting process and talking to these writers and directors like directly. So it's very cool.
Yeah, definitely. And then speaking of AI, so how do you stay up to date with all the AI stuff? Because I feel like every day, everything is changing, everything everywhere all at the same time, right? How do you keep yourself up to date with all the trends, with the latest technology, right? What are some advice you have for us?
The first piece of advice I would say is don't try to keep up with all the things that are happening just because it's too much. It's overwhelming for anybody. It's overwhelming for myself. And I spend my whole day thinking about this kind of stuff, and I can't even keep up with everything. So I do have several newsletters in AI that I follow. Ben Spites, Neuron, those are all free ones that are at the top of my head, and there's several others that I subscribe to as well. There's a lot of good podcasts. AI Breakdown is a good one for AI news. Something like Hard Fork is a weekly that goes a little bit deeper into the subject. There's a lot of good accounts to just kind of follow on Twitter. But for the most part, what I would say is like, don't worry too much about like, oh, this startup has raised this much money. There's a lot of that. Like, I think, when OpenAI or Anthropic or Meta launches a new model, I would pay attention. But the main thing is I would just try it. There are so many people that I know who, use ChatGPT, but they're only using 3.5, the free version.
That's me. A free version. That's me.
So I tell everybody, yourself, everyone, like, you pay $20 a month. Just choose one of them. Like the new Claude.
Claude AI is really good.
The new one 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Claude 3.
It was okay. And then a friend of mine who's actually working with Anthropic was kind of like, try the one you pay for. Yeah. It's really good. It's really, really good.
Okay.
So there's a big difference between the free and the paid ones. And I would say even just, you're not getting the full experience unless you're paying the $20. But I will say like $20 for the amount of compute, for the power that you are getting for these models is insane. Like, again, a few years ago, if you would have told me that I could have something that would be able to talk to me while I'm in the car, could be able to, decipher photos of me, could do OCR of, everything I write and just transcribe it down, and all the information in the world is basically at its fingertips, like for $20 a month, it's pretty amazing. Like, it's the best $20 you could possibly spend.
All right. Which reminds me, I feel like Apple's Siri kind of missed that opportunity, even though they kind of started early, but just gradually, I feel like all these other companies are really catching up. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Look, Siri in many ways, I think, has been a disaster. And like, dare I even say, there aren't many Apple products that are like embarrassing for the company.
Yeah.
And I would say probably Siri is one of them. It almost feels weird to say that because they were ahead of the thing, but like now it's almost a joke at how bad the product actually is, even though I guess people still use it for timers or whatever. But if you use OpenAI's Whisper in the car or wherever, like it's amazing. Like because it's you are 95% of the way there of just having a natural conversation with an AI. And you can you can ask about anything in the world. Like I'll do it with the kids in the car. We were listening to some music recently, and there was something unique in the song that we'd heard a bunch of times. We're like, oh, what was that? Well, let's ask ChatGPT. So like we go in there, we hit the button, like, hey, in this one song, there's this moment, like, what is that? What's going on there? Starts
Yeah.
explaining. And you're like, oh, like, and you just go deeper and deeper. You can't do that with, Google or Siri or Alexa. None of those things would be able to do that. But like ChatGPT's Whisper allows for things like that.
All right, I'll try it. I think $20. It's probably more entertainment and knowledge than Disney
Like,
Plus, Netflix all combined. Yeah,
seriously, like cancel
true.
Netflix. Like if it's a budget issue, like cancel other stuff to
Cancel
just
those.
like
Right,
free up
that's
the
true.
$20. It
Yeah.
is so worth it. And then like just make it your default on everything. Just use it. Instead of Google, use that. Use it like for recipes. Use it for this and that. Like it's amazing the things and I have no financial stake, to be very clear. Like
Yeah. No, I hear you. I
yeah,
hear you.
I'm
It's a
not
pure
making any money off
recommendation.
of this. I'm not an open AI salesperson by any stretch. But yeah.
Love that. Love that. The last question is kind of I want to hear more your opinion. So, in the age of AI, do you think people crave more human connection? So, what I meant is, so let's talk about ChatGPT or any
Yeah.
AI models, right? They can talk to you just like a therapist, just like communication coach.
Yeah.
So similarly, I could have. I mean, I work for Stitch Fits. I could have ChatGPT pick up outfit for me. Given the fit, the height, the weight of me. But do you think people actually would crave for the stylist would do that for you, or the therapist who have been having 20 years of experiences, or the
Yeah.
coach who has had, coach like executives or senior leaders versus actually an AI who has been trained with like millions of models or trillions
Yeah.
of data models?
Yeah. Look, I think there's an interesting paradox with
Mm-hmm.
all this. Like, if you ask people if they would want to, go to the grocery store and just do self checkouts and not be bothered, most people will say, well, yeah, that's my preference. I just want to go in, I don't want to talk to anybody, all that. But then you ask people, you actually then say, how happy were you with this experience of people who do the self checkout versus they talk to a person, maybe somebody's bagging something, and maybe they have to wait in line for a little bit, whatever it might be. Generally speaking, people are much happier in the situation where they're actually talking to other people.
Trader
This is
Joe's.
true.
There's no self checkout. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
look, and I'm somebody who does self checkout all the time. I like this is a paradox I feel, or a fallacy that like I succumb to as well. Like I get that. Like people if they're taking a train or something like that are typically happier if they're actually talk to people on the train versus just like scroll TikTok the whole time on there. So we are happier around other people. We don't always realize that. And I think, there is something amazing about having human. Look, with therapists, for example, as you said, I think there are times where you probably just want to talk to an AI. It's really
yeah,
embarrassing
that's
or
fair.
whatever
Just
it
venting
is.
it
Or
out.
you
Yeah.
don't want to talk to a human about it. And you just need to get some fat. It's 3 a.m. It's embarrassing. And
Yeah.
you just need to talk to an AI, and you want the AI is going to be there for you. It's a machine. It can't judge you or anything like that. Or maybe it will become sentient and start judging you for what you're thinking. Um, but there is something to be said about that relationship that you'll build
Yeah.
with the therapist. So
Right.
I think with most of these things, the answer is going to be both, and we're going to
Yeah.
find cases for each of them. I do start to wonder about like the her future. If anybody's
Mm-hmm.
seen the movie starring Joaquin Phoenix from 10 years ago,
Yeah.
I think people will have AI girlfriends and AI boyfriends and all that in the future. And I
Yeah.
think they will be initially judged, and I think probably at some point that might even be accepted within society. I mean, a person walking around staring at the phone, people used to get made so much fun of if they kept their earbuds in. You know, like if they had
Yes.
Bluetooth headsets, and again, they looked a little bit, maybe they weren't as fashionable. Apple didn't, do that or anything, but societal norms change, and things
Yes.
that were not acceptable years ago become acceptable over time. Like that is the one thing of the future I don't know. Like, are you going to be able to seclude yourself from human beings to live a matrix life? What was that? The red pill or the blue pill? I can never get them
Yeah,
straight.
right,
But
right, yeah,
whichever.
right, right, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like in the Matrix, where you say like, do you know what? I'm just going to live in the Matrix because
Yeah.
like I don't know any better or whatever else. Like, I mean, these are choices I think in the not too distant future, us as a society are going to really start to grapple with.
That's true. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think the societal norms are changing, right? It's
Yes.
just like AI is changing every day. People's expectation of themselves, of each other, of companionship, of love, relationships. It's all will be changing, for better or for worse. But I think we just have to adapt to it. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and look, the one thing I tell people is now is not the time to be afraid of these models. They're
that's true.
not sentient, or anything like that. Like now's the time to just try and understand them, like
Understand?
understand how
Yeah,
they work, understand how
yeah.
they operate. But it is the time to play with these things because
That's
you
true.
want to
That's true.
understand them today because they are only going to get better. And like at some point in the not too distant future, we are going to be at a place where, you know, people are going to want to, marry their character.ai, um, you know, avatar that they've created just for themselves. Um, and as crazy as that sounds now, like I think we're going down
I feel
that
like
path.
a
But
Black
like
Mirror
again, the more you
episode,
understand these
right?
tools today, the more like you'll be able to cope with whatever future it is that we're all creating.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I feel like Black Mirror or Westworld, they're becoming reality sooner or later, for sure.
Black Mirror used to freak me out, and now it's like watching a documentary. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so true. Yeah, these are all the questions I have. Thank you so much, Mike.